so.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Okay.
No props.
Good. Great. Perfect. Hi, Caroline. This is so, ooh, fancy. It's a little much for me. I'm not used to it. So. Oh, goodness.
I feel like I violated a lot of rules when I sat in her chair.
That's hysterical. Yeah. So how long have you been working for her?
I joined
Oh, fun.
however long.
How did you do that? What's your background?
Her husband, Tara, over the years I went to South.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah.
Had a transition and
There you go.
worked out as well.
Oh, so nice.
Great leader, really.
Yeah.
Good morning, everybody.
Yeah, me too.
We don't have one of the gavels. So. Welcome, and it's good to see all of you all in person again. So Craig has reminded me to remind you all of one thing. We are recording this from downstairs, the audio recording. So when you speak for those purposes, there's a button on your microphone. Make sure you turn the microphone on. So, and the other, Sean is here. He is the designee for Chair Bledsoe, the chair of the Budget, Finance, and Economic Development Committee. So he is with us in her stead today as she is out at a press conference. So with that, we'll get started. You have the minutes from the June 15th meeting in front of you. Unless somebody has some corrections, we'll take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Richard? Second from Caroline. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
You have to push the button.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda, I see Ashley Simpson, is an update on the status of the Jobs Fund. Ashley, it's all yours.
Great, thank you, Kevin, and good morning, board members. Today I do have a brief update for you guys on the Jobs Fund and where we stand. In your package, you'll find your first slide is a financial overview, and this is as of September 28th, 2021. Since the inception of this program, which was around 2014 with the first grants and loans going out in 2015, there has been $3.31 million awarded through grants, loans, and forgivable loans. The breakdown of that, we have 10 grants, 8 forgivable loans, and 8 loans that have been approved through council. Of those 26 agreements, 20 of them are currently active. So we'll be talking about those 20 active grants and loans more today. We have 3 that have been closed. The most recent is Awesome U, which you guys might remember we discussed at a previous meeting. They had met and maintained their goals and got 100% forgiveness on their grants. The other 2 are EIE. They're a company that made a closeout payment to Early Close. And then the other is MetaSignals, and we'll be talking about them a little bit more later on today. They're a company that defaulted on their loan. We also have 3 that are sitting that are approved but undrawn, and those include a non-traditional loan that was approved for Sumitomo, and 2 grants, one for Ashland Valvoline and one for Hannah Resource. So those total about $230,000 in awards that are currently undrawn. Looking at our program revenues since the inception, Council's allocated $4.02 million towards this program to be granted out. We've gotten back payments of $65,000 in interest, $416,000 in repaid principal, $9,000 in application fees, and just a little bit there in fines and fees to give us a total of $1.2 million remaining after what we've already awarded out that would be available to give out in awards if we get applications in and if there are applications that you guys wish to fund or approve. Looking at where we are with those 20 active agreements, through those agreements we have 251 jobs that have been committed. That comes to an average cost of about $11,000 per job that we contract through this program. And through those 251 jobs that are committed, we have an expected new payroll of $15.3 million, which equates to about $344,000 in payroll tax every year for the city. Through our agreements, we set loans and goals for our companies that come through the program. And then to ensure that we're meeting those goals, we perform compliance checks annually. And Del Morgan from our office, who's up here in the front row, has made a lot of contacts with these businesses this year and has been helping us get these compliance checks done for this year. So thank you, Del. We've recently completed 9 compliance checks, and we're doing a priority focus this year on our loans and forgivable loans. You'll see the compliance checks for our grantees come through later this year. We've performed 8 checks on active projects, and one of them was a closeout review, and that was Awesome U. What we're finding in our compliance checks as we're moving forward is that COVID has had some negative impacts on several of our Jobs Fund partners. So that's one of the reasons we wanted to bring this to you today and to draw that to your attention. We're seeing the effects that we had discussed and thought we might see last year come through actually this year, and we think that's because there was quite a bit of support for companies last year, but as that wanes off, we are seeing some of the numbers of jobs created and things that are falling off for some of our recipients. And as a note, our agreements do include provisions for non-compliance, and we'll discuss those today as well. There's really just 2 options. It'd be a repayment penalty. It can be assessed as an annual penalty or as take that annual penalty and spread it out over 12 months. So that's one option that the awards give. The other is to put the loan in default and to recall the loan. If we were to seek any other action, it would require for the board to make a separate recommendation and for that to be approved by the board and in some cases also by the council. So if you guys see anything you want to discuss today and have any alternate recommendations to a repayment penalty or default, this would be the avenue we would want to pursue that in. We do have 2 compliance reports that we had previously discussed. Those were for Summit Biosciences and for Awesome Inc. Awesome Inc. had met and maintained for the appropriate amount of time, received 100% principal reduction, and is now closed. Summit Biosciences had reached the point where they could begin receiving principal reduction 5 years out, and they had maintained the number of jobs that were required from their agreement, so they've received a 10% principal reduction. We also have 2 new agreements that have been checked and are in compliance. Those were approved at the end of 2020. And those are for Water Warriors. They had a traditional loan. They've hired one of the 7 new employees that were required by their contract, and we have dispersed $100,000 of the $250,000 that was approved by the board. And we actually received their first payment today, so they're also in payment compliance. First payments on these were due on October 15th of this year. The other is Childhood Neurology Center, also in compliance. Theirs is a forgivable loan, and they're making interest payments. And they've hired 2 of the 2 employees that were required by their contract, and they've gotten the full disbursement of their $100,000 today. Next slide has 2 companies that we found to be at or above the compliance levels required by their agreements. These are Avail. They have a loan through us which requires them to create 4 jobs, and for those jobs to have an average wage of $40 an hour. And we found them to be compliant across the board. They have hired at or above the amount of jobs that were required and are paying at or above the wage that was required. Other payments are also on chart and in compliance, and we did a job site visit here, and the job site is functioning and has the employees at it. The second company is Fuji. They have a non-traditional loan with us that requires for 16 jobs to be created at an average of $34 an hour. And again, we found them to have at or above the number of jobs required and to be paying the wage required and compliant across the board. This next slide looks like we're a little bit off the screen, but hopefully is showing in your packet. These are 3 companies that we found to be non-compliant in one of our 3 areas. So the first is Legit Apps. They've got a loan through us that requires for 10 jobs to be created and for those to pay $19 an hour. They're currently not compliant on their payments. They're 1 quarterly payment behind, so there was 1 due in September that was not made, but they did make some payments earlier this year. The job site, as we discussed with this company, and we're kind of talking with them about their business and their model, we found that they also are a principally remote company and actually haven't had a job site in Lexington, Fayette for some time. However, the employees that they are hiring are located in Lexington, Fayette. They did have significantly more jobs that had been created through the program, but have had to cut back on their employees through COVID. They're currently at 1 of the 10 jobs that were required. So we have several areas of non-compliance with Legit Apps. And calculation of their penalty, which looks at the number of jobs that were created and the wage as there is actual as opposed to their agreement, as well as what the principal is remaining on their loan. That annual penalty would be calculated out at $8,065 for them this year if applied. The second company is Whereware. They have a non-traditional loan with us, which requires 4 jobs to be created.
Can I ask a quick question? I know you're giving your report. So we just kind of talked about the issues that people are having related to COVID. The penalty, do we kind of re-examine whether or not a penalty should be charged if they're having issues related to that? If it's just non-compliance, that's one thing. If it's related to COVID, maybe we need to think about it.
Anthony, that's one of the things we want to discuss once Ashley finishes up.
Okay.
These penalties have not yet been applied, so I think there is room for discussion. The owner of this company in particular has reached out and requested to speak with the board if you guys would like. For Whereware and that non-traditional loan, they are compliant on their payments and they are compliant on their job site. Of those 4 jobs that are required, they have 3 in place. So 3 instead of 4, and those 3 that are created are paying at or above the $23 an hour in wages. So that's that one. The last is Hydra, who has a loan with us. It requires that 10 jobs be created. They're again compliant in their payment status, and it's not on your screen, but they are compliant in their job site as well. It's maintained here in Lexington, Fayette. Of those 10 jobs that were to be created for them, they have 3 that have been created and maintained. They again had created more, but have scaled back due to COVID. Your last slide is really just the number of companies that we have remaining to be checked this year. So those are our compliance checks that will be coming forward in the future, and which bucket they fall into as far as grants, forgivable loans, or loans. And I'll go back to this slide because I believe we did have some discussion there on it.
Thanks, Ashley. And with that, Anthony, we'll go right to your question. So, yeah, make sure you turn the microphone.
Right. We recognize that that the companies are having issues related to COVID, and obviously, you know, there's a requirement that, of course, they meet their obligations for the contract. But I'm kind of looking at bankers right now to see how you all are handling situations like that, because I'm sure you've made loans and not everybody's able to pay those back related to COVID. Should we look at employing some of the same strategies or methods that the banks are using when we're looking at this? This is essentially a loan fund, so.
Before we go, because I think it would be good to get both our bankers, and because I see him putting his finger on the button. Tyrone's also been, for the last year, managing our efforts with the small business community. And, you know, we've had 3 waves of this now. Well, 2, because we extended the second phase. 1, we took kind of one directive with it. The second, we've kind of taken a different compliance directive with it. So why don't you?
Well, it's just my opinion. Sorry if I'm screaming into this thing, but it's just my opinion that, you know, and talking with my bankers when we're looking at people's issues through this grant process, that, you know, it's a year and 3 months, you know, that we've gone through this, and you would think that the particular entrepreneurs would have made some adjustments and you know, and made some movement to go forward. You know, when they have an obligation, you know, you start trimming in certain areas so that you can pay your obligations until things turn around. And I don't know, can we ask that question? I mean, what if they come back to us with? You know, what if they come back to the staff with to say that, you know, to mitigate some of the problems, or these are the changes that we've made? That's what I would be interested in. Have they just sat there and let it spin, thinking that we're going to do something forgivable, or have they put some actions in forth that would give us confidence that they could meet the obligation?
Sure.
Ashley, before we go to Victoria and Jordan, what have you heard from them?
Each of the companies that are listed on the screen have reached out in some way to say, we realize we're not in compliance. We would like to do something with the board, and to discuss what we can do moving forward. Particularly, Legit Apps has reached out a few times. I believe that they've not made payments right now or made any suggestions because they're hoping to be able to speak with the board. Others have, that are not listed on the screen, but are other companies that will be compliance checked later this year, have reached out and asked to make, for instance, if they have a payment that's due and they're not able to make the full payment, they've asked, can I make an interest-only payment? And I've encouraged them to do so. So you will see some later in the year who've been making interest payments, but not their full payments, things like that.
Anthony, I didn't mean to cut you off. Do you want to go to the bankers, or you want to follow
Yeah,
up?
I still would like to hear.
Okay,
that
well, I
other
just want to make sure you didn't have a, Jordan, Victoria, one of you, both of you?
Obviously, it's always on a case, because it is not.
Case by case.
Are we on? Okay.
You are.
There you go.
Okay, it's a case-by-case basis, and you want them at least to make their interest payments at all. You do listen to them. I mean, you really just got to listen to the client and
Yeah.
find out what's going on. There's no one wide sweeping, this is how we're going to do it for everybody. Now, with COVID, right, a lot of people here, we've all heard the jobs, it's hard to get people. So that would be my question to them. I'm sure you've tried. Are you able to get them and not keep them, or are you able to, what's the issue there?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people just aren't working right now, as we all know.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would say.
I don't have a whole lot else to add other than it sounds promising that there's a dialogue right now, so that sounds good. And I'd like to see, and it doesn't have to be right now, but maybe just some more data for each one of these, just to kind of see what the numbers look like. I think that would be helpful. But
Also, I wanted to add, how is the penalty calculated?
Yeah.
That's a specific, I didn't understand that, sorry if I missed it.
I actually don't have a copy of the agreement with me, but it's spelled out in each agreement. It's a formula that takes into account the actual wages minus the requested wages minus the actual, and then you put that over the number of actual hours to come up with a ratio, and then you multiply that out by basically the amount of the loan that's remaining to make them pay a portion of the remaining loan as a penalty.
Ashley, while you're standing there, Caroline just leaned over and asked, do you happen to have the loan amounts for those three in front of you?
I do. As far as their outstanding principal, looks like Legit Apps has about $70,000 in remaining principal, Whereware has $80,000 in remaining principal, and Hydra has $52,000 in remaining principal. And also wanted to note these penalties were actually an earlier version of the presentation. I apologize for that. 8,000 is correct for Legit Apps, but Whereware's is calculated out at 1,480, and Hydra's is calculated out at 3,895. So it's really the Whereware one that's showing a little bit higher than it actually would be calculated at.
And Dale, I know you've been on these to the point on workforce. Anything you want to add? You need, only because we're recording, to pick it up.
Well, me and Ashley had shared the same concerns about how do you take into account the whole COVID thing as far as people being able to, for some of the businesses that haven't been able to meet their employee requirements. And we were just wondering how the discussion was going to go about how do you take into account COVID.
And Aaron, and if you can't answer this, just let me, do you know what the state's doing on KBI based on performance and COVID? If you don't, that's okay. I just thought you maintain your contacts over there, so.
This is a long walk to say, I'm sorry, I don't know what they're doing on KBI right now.
Everybody else would have just shook their head. A man and it's.
Ashley, I'm curious if these are startups, if they are also seeking any additional funding from venture sources. Have they gone to the state, not necessarily KBI, but Capital Seed, Commonwealth CSC. Now the name's gone out of my mind. Commonwealth Seed Capital, you know, some of the venture funds. I'm wondering if they're giving you some information on that.
They have not. Unfortunately, we don't have that information, but I think that'd be great suggestions for these companies.
Council member?
Thank you.
Ashley, I appreciate that. I like the chart that you showed. We'll get $15.3 million new revenue, payroll coming in. How much did we pay to get that? Is this part of the 3 million, most of the 3 million to pay for that? And
For
I'll
those,
explain to you why I'm asking this question after you give me an answer where we're coming in with this 15.3 million extra payroll.
sure, thank you, council member. For those 20 active agreements that we have, those calculate out to 2.69 million in investment. So for the grants, loans, and forgivable loans for those 20 active agreements, it's 2.7 million, it's 2.69 in active investment.
And what I'm coming to is, we have this opera money for $100 million, and I keep seeing things like this, and it can, and as you know, before the pandemic, the city was $30 million shortfall in the budget. And when I see opportunities like this, and I'm trying to get my colleagues to understand, there are ways that we can come out of this pandemic with a positive number, and this is a prime example.
Sure.
That I'm afraid we're not going that direction. And that's why I told you all a couple times in the meetings, this is our future, to take $100 million with no restriction for the first time ever. And I'm looking at your budget, because I've been here where we had to lay people off, and it's not fun. And if we do these projects that some of my colleagues want, it's gonna go put us back into laying people off. I'd rather see this money, if we can sell it, invest it, and say, we have your ideas, but this isn't the year to do it. But when we get this money circulating, we will be able to prioritize some of these programs down the road for the next 5, 10, 15 years. But to spend it all in 1 year, to put you back into your $30, $40 million, and I know how much you hate that word, but I look at you guys up here, it's just, these are the kind of things that I'm looking for, and I just don't feel like we're going the right direction. That's just me with my colleagues, but hopefully some of you all up here may be able to open some of their eyes and show that this is a good opportunity to not to go back and make your life a living heck in $30 million or $50 million, and then some of my colleagues get their wish to raise taxes, in which I do not want to raise taxes. So I just want to appreciate you showing me an example there. Thank you.
Other questions for Victoria?
I have a follow-up. With these compliance, the three that are uncompliant, and I know we've got some more coming up, that's probably why we're trying to figure this out. Do you get annual financials on the companies? Do we get annual financials?
We do get profit and loss statements from each, and we can discuss whether or not we can release those.
Yeah, and I think we'd have to look at Evan for the,
Well, I was just saying, that's going to give you a really good indication of, their ability to pay or not pay. And then you say restructure the agreement, or when we restructure the agreement for these through, it's going to be for all the ones following too, correct? To lower that annual penalty?
I believe, as you were saying earlier, you look at each one individually as a banker. I believe we would need to look at each of these individually and amend their agreements individually, if that were to be the case.
How many would that be? That'd be a lot, okay.
so
there's not much you can do today? Maybe not.
Anybody else?
Real quick,
Jordan?
these three loans that are
Jordan, is your mic on? Yeah.
these three loans that are non-compliant, were they all put in place before COVID? Do we have the dates on those?
I don't have the date when these loans were made, which Wes may
But they were all done.
but they are all pre-COVID.
They were all
pre-COVID?
pre-COVID.
That's
Yeah,
what I figured.
I can answer
Just
that.
curious.
I don't, like Ashley, I don't have the dates, but I can tell you they were all pre-COVID.
Thank you.
Chair, I did want to note.
Wes, did you
Oh,
have?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I also don't know them right off the top of my head, but I do know that they've been in place for at least a couple of years for each one. The majority of them, if not all of them, precede the pandemic by a year or so.
You've never had issue with them in the past? You've never had issue with them in the past?
Not on the job numbers or the job site or anything like that, no.
And Jordan, we kind of left the conversation a while ago. Did you want to have do you have any addition to what Victoria was talking about earlier as far as talking to the client, or?
No, I mean, I just echo what she said. It's you probably don't want to hear this, but it's case by case. So there's not going to be a sweeping answer to just all this. But I would just love to see just the payment history and the date of each loan, which again, I don't need to see it right now, but I think that would be helpful. And if there weren't issues before COVID, I think this makes it a little bit of an easier conversation for us to have personally.
Well, I think, I like what you said. I mean, we do look at these individually as well as collectively. I mean, you all will remember a few months back us dealing with one where the company came to us early, and let us know what was going on. You're going to hear the same thing here shortly under workforce, where one of the partners came to us proactively and really has worked with us to kind of mitigate what they faced because of COVID and solely because of COVID. So we do look at them individually.
You had asked earlier about what economic development is doing now, and I don't know about now, but when I was there, KBI is not necessarily an issue with those because those are not loans to be paid back. They're just, you either get your tax credit or not.
Right.
But we did have a lot of small business loans. Some were secured, most were not. And the practice there really was just to give, as long as the entities were cooperating, to give them as much time as they needed and room that we could. But of course, the goal is always to get the principal back. So, to the extent we can do that. I don't know what other debts these entities have, but I think Victoria is right. We'd have to look at financial statements. What business plans do they have? How have they amended their business plans? I think as long as, like you said, we're having a lot of discussion, then we've got something to work with.
Probably the better comparison, is the economic development bonds, which, Anthony, you'll remember, when you don't hit those targets, we've got deposits here that we can use for economic development projects based on that compliance of jobs and pay. That's probably the better comparison than KBI. Go ahead, Tyler.
Well, one of the reasons why I raised it, obviously, is because, and I do like what you said about case by case, because I do think it's going to really be that way, right? I mean, everybody does not have the same issues as related to supply chain, for example. In our business, we've got 22-week lead time before we can even get materials to turn a project. So if you can't turn the work, then you certainly can't make the payments. There's just a lot involved with what businesses are going through right now, not just from being good financial stewards of making payments and loans back to us. So I think looking at it case by case, Tyrone, you make a very good point. What have they been doing in advance of this? The communication back to the team, I think, is important too. So, I think it is going to be kind of case by case. I don't know that we can come out with a statement today that says we will deal with all of these that have penalties like X.
And Anthony, you will understand what I'm about to say because you said here, and Caroline, you've been involved at the state level. We want to work with the companies because the goal is ultimately success.
Sure.
Okay. But we also look at it from the focal point that these are public tax dollars.
I was going to say, the fiduciary responsibility, part of it is what you have to, I think what you have to consider. And so the question I want to ask is that, is it too much to ask the staff to kind of get, I always think this is important, when we were doing, microloans, it's like that narrative was important, what that individual client was doing and what their profit and loss really looked like, what other obligations that they have out there. If we could if we could find a way to assess all those things, then at our next meeting, we could make a real decision on that, right? I mean, it's not that I don't believe anything that the staff is saying, but I'm just saying it would give us something in writing to say, oh, this is what individual companies are doing. This is how they're going to help themselves move forward, because that's what it's all about. They have to make the change, not us.
I like what you're saying, and I think, because we can sit here and discuss without a lot of detail. And I think maybe if you all are agreeable, at the next meeting, we can have a little bit more conversation about these three after there's been an opportunity. And I'm looking back at Ashley and Craig to follow up with the three, maybe get a little bit more detail on where they think they're going to be and how they're going to get there. And Tyler?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, one thing I would like to know from the companies from a good faith standpoint is what hiring efforts they've taken specifically. So rather than COVID workforce issues, got it, but what have you done to proactively hire? Have you posted in the paper? Have you gone to agencies? What efforts have you taken? And what are you taking?
So any more questions on this, or we go ahead?
One thing, maybe staff could bring recommendations for these three specific ones, and also, is Wes our attorney? Is that right?
He practices one on a regular basis around here. But actually, Evan is the attorney, but you see which attorneys come into the microphone first.
Sorry.
I'm just the city tax collector, so I take a much harsher view on these in my daily role anyway. So.
I'm a reformed attorney, so I get it. No, what I think we also might need to know, to the extent we're going to start looking in detail at these issues, is whether we should and are able to go into closed session when we're discussing the business's plans, finances, et cetera.
Yeah, as we get more information, Ashley and Craig, I'll take a look at what was being provided, and I can formulate some plan to be able to do something like that in a way that would help in the privacy of the organization, the company, obviously, but still allow you to be able to adequately review for next steps.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, Ashley, I don't know whether it's going to be you or Evan, there's one more item under this as it relates to med signals. And this is just an update for you all. It goes toward the compliance, but it is an update.
Yeah, this is about the Med Signals Jobs Fund. I believe it was a loan. In around 2017, we got a judgment lien against the company, as well as individual business owner, and in the amount of approximately $250,000. Including interest and all that stuff. Recently, the individual business owner, Vesta Brew, she sold her last remaining house in Lexington. Her attorney reached out to us, offered to pay, to use the proceeds of the sale to pay $175,000 of that. So we took that offer. As a function of, take too much, they might not sell, don't take it, and obviously, she sold that property, we took, and they paid us the $175,000 of that loan. So I believe the rest will be written off, is my understanding. It's better outcome than we were expecting before that phone call from her.
Let's see Mr. Barbary coming in behind you there.
So for those of you that don't know, this was our worst case scenario. One of these people, I think she actually went to prison. So they were defrauding not only us, but the state as well. She ended up going to prison. I think she's in her 70s now. This was the only piece of property that she had left. We walked away with most of the money from the sale of the property, so we felt pretty good about it because frankly, we thought we were going to write this off as a total loss 2 or 3 years ago when this first came up. So we were thrilled to get as much money out of it as we did. So at some point in time, the remainder of this loan will be written off as a loss, but we ended up getting, 3/4 of the money back that we had ended up loaning them, thinking that it was going to be a total loss at that point in time. So.
Okay,
I guess that was my question. What was the total loan, or the total amount owed?
I think they still owed about, they had made sporadic payments at the beginning because this loan actually went back several years. And at the very beginning, they were making the payments that they were supposed to make. I think the total amount of the judgment lien we ended up getting was about $250,000. And I think probably about 20,000 plus of that was interest and whatnot, and the remainder was principal. But we can get you all the exact numbers on that if you want.
I have those numbers with me today if you would like. The loan balance, the principal balance for MediSignals was $239,405. We received the settlement of $175, so the bad debt that would be written off on this agreement would be $64,405.
And I agree with Dave. You know, when we had the conversations with the law department back several years, I candidly don't think many of us thought we would be sitting here with this scenario. We thought it would be much worse. Any questions? We just wanted to make sure you all were aware of this.
Yeah, Kevin, just a thought. I love to look at every unfortunate situation, see if we can learn anything from it. So I wasn't here when all that happened, but can we kind of draw any learnings from our actions here and the unfortunate outcomes?
I'm going to be real careful what I say on this. I don't think, and Dave and Evan can certainly contradict me, this was a case that went to the courts for a different reason. And as Dave said, you know, there was prison time involved. You know, we did a bunch of due diligence on the front end of this. You know, we all knew something like, not this scenario, but we all knew we would lose money more than likely on a loan at some point. It's just part of, I mean, bankers deal with it every day. I'm not sure we could have, I'm not sure that there's a whole lot you can transfer on this one.
Okay.
And then Dave's going to come up and contradict me.
Well, it's a lesson in
Just so you all know, before Dave talks, I mean, you got to be careful what he says because he's the #1 Florida fan in this whole building.
He's looking for a hug right now.
It's a lesson learned in why we need the guarantees. If we did not have a guarantee in this particular case, we would have walked away with nothing. I think that, you know, this was one of the first couple of years we were doing these. And this was I think part of the remainder of the business, frankly, might still be operating and making money, but the federal government ended up getting whatever was to be had out of that. It was a great business idea. It was great. I mean, and I think the idea itself is still successful, but I think that we are doing a better job, arguably, of vetting out the groups as they come in now that we have a couple years under our belt. And this is why a lot of times we're advocating to get guarantees, because if you don't have something like that and the business is not successful or just simply goes bankrupt without any kind of criminal activity, we're frankly not going to get anything. So.
Yeah. That's a good answer. I mean, I like that answer. And I you know, every time we enter into these situations, we're always guessing and predicting and hoping to some degree, but anything we can do to learn along the way to lessen that would be good. And I think that's a good lesson that we've hopefully, you know, will use going forward.
Yeah, and I think, Brad, the thing that doesn't probably show up in these meetings, and I think you all get a sense of it, it doesn't really, when we bring these, there's been a lot of discussions back and forth with the attorneys in this building, with our Division of Finance, on what we need to make, you know, the review on the front end of the financials and that kind of thing, but as well as, okay, and here's what we need in the agreement to make sure that the city's interest is protected as well. I mean, our lawyers and our finance people take really good care of us in that regard.
I'll say too, having been on the board at the time, that there was a lot of board discussion about her presentation, as I recall. And, you know, our board, again, this was early in the process. It's become much more kind of vocal about the process because it's obviously there's a lot more understanding about what we're doing here and just how to do it well. And we've grown in that way. But I think that to Victoria's point, there is kind of intuition involved in working with some of these folks, and when they come and present, to take really seriously not just what's on the paper, but kind of the vibe that person, for lack of a better word, is putting forth, and how each board member kind of feels about, again, putting public tax dollars in that person's hands. So I think, sometimes we don't see those people as often because, of course, you all have done your due diligence, but being able to talk to those people and really getting a sense of their savvy and who they are and how they'll protect those dollars is important as well.
Yeah. And this was actually a rare case because we did a site visit to the site in Texas. We happened to be there. And so there were Jenna Greathouse and a couple of others, and I went and actually visited the Texas location. That it even had that kind of step. So to your point, I see Dave. To your point, you can always look back at these and try to analyze, okay, what one more question could I have asked? Because you want to do that. It's the right thing to do. This one's got such a unique twist to it because of the criminal aspect of it that, and I'll let Dave go.
Yeah, and so some of the uniqueness of this that Kevin is describing is we were in a position arguably to walk away with more back when this first transpired criminally, and we were instructed to cooperate with the other authorities, which we did, so as not to alert the business that something else, something bad might be coming down the pipe. So as a result, and we figured that we might get made whole as a result of that cooperation, but unfortunately we were not. So once again, we were really happy to end up getting anything at all at this point in time. So.
Yeah, I just want to make sure my comments weren't in any form of judgment or concern or criticism of the past. It's just I love to learn what we do. I kind of live by I reserve the right to get smarter thinking. But always it's tough when you go to these businesses here. We have to represent the tax dollar obligation, but at the same time, there's a line about how deep do you go into the business thinking, right? In support of a couple of things we've said, I agree case by case is wonderful. I like the fact that we do that, and in support of Councilmember Maloney's concept is, I love the return on it, but we've got to make sure we're betting on solid businesses. We need to be thoughtful of that, and we need to be aware of sunk cost and when to get out and what standards we hold people to. So those are, I think, really great comments, and we just need to learn every time we can.
Yeah,
and some bad things will happen.
I agree completely, and there are occasions where you all don't see applications because
you stopped it.
Not because when we ask for more information or start probing, they just never make it up to the full application process.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I love the comment that we're getting better. I think that's even more powerful.
With that, we're going to shift and talk about workforce. And so Elodie is going to come. This is the presentation you all get on an annual basis, kind of updating you on the status of the last year of the program. So Elodie, it is all yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me? All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Elodie Dickinson, and I'm the Director of Workforce and Business Engagement for the City of Lexington. So today I'm going to give you several different updates about workforce development in the area of our grants and then our Work Lexington project, and then we'll go to the next additional item that's related to our current workforce grants. In your packet, you see the slide, the $200,000. I don't know if you remember, I think the last time we had Zoom in my presentation, I just wanted to remind everybody about for 2020 and 2021, we had $200,000 authorized. That's what I'll be mainly talking about today with the outcomes. And then I'll also be talking about the $200,000 that is authorized for 2022, because that's coming up for the grant application process. So we're going to cover those two topics among some others. So as a reminder, for the 2020 grant, we had three, if you recall, we had Partners could either apply for the job placement outcomes, or they could do certification licensure outcomes. So we had 5 different workforce partners who we awarded dollars to, and this was back in 2020. The 3 that chose the job placement track were Jubilee Jobs, Lexington Rescue Mission, Kentucky Refugee Ministries, and then the 2 who chose the certification licensure track was Building Institute of Central Kentucky and Community Action Council. So for the entities, the 3 entities who chose job placement as their outcome method, they had 300 combined, they had 300 job placements. The average wage was $11.54. The average hours was 38.4 hours. The top 3 industries that were represented in the job placements was 66% of individuals job placed were in manufacturing, 15% in hospitality, and 10% in skilled trades. There were also some lower percentages that were represented in retail, business and professional, healthcare, and transportation. For the 2 entities who chose certification licensure outcomes, we had 2 who received their HVAC certification, their licensure, 1 who now is a master electrician, 1 who is a child development associate, and 3 who have their CDLs. 2 of the 5 agencies in this current year, so they started programming again for year 2. So we had, this is year 2 of 2. We had 2 of the 5 agencies, the 2 who chose the licensure and the certification route. They are providing CDL, not CDA, but we'll talk about that in a minute, HVAC, plumbing, and electric. And then 3 of the 5 agencies are also continuing to provide direct job placement. So that cycle of year 2 will end next year on June 30th. So the next step for the economic development grants is the next cycle. So we have to get all these in place before we make announcements. And I wanted to go through this timeline as a good reminder to those who are new on the board, or as just a reminder for everyone else. So coming up, probably around in November, we will have an announcement, and I will come before the board, or at least send some information. We will have a grant application cycle again, and this will be for 2022 to 2023. So December 30th is our tentative deadline that we're looking at for a workforce agency to submit their applications. January will be when we score the applications. February will be when we make recommendations to you. March will be when we announce the grant award recipients. April will be when we start processing the purchase of service agreements. May and June will be the council approval process, and then the grant funds will be dispersed so that programming can begin on July 1, 2022 to June 30th of 2023. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is our Work Lexington. It's our pilot project, Lexington Workforce Resource Center. As a reminder, this is a pilot project that we began at Charles Young Center that's located at 540 East 3rd Street. The program began in July. And we have 9 workforce providers who provide services every week, some a couple times a month, and they provide a job placement and job training opportunities to residents living in and around Charles Young. Of course, it's not limited to just those neighborhoods, but that's our target audience. And then the United Way of the Bluegrass, they have a full-time staff member who's at Charles Young. And so Anna provides supportive services. If someone comes in looking for a job, she can be there to help with any social service referrals. And then conversely, if she has someone who comes in to meet her, she can refer them to our job placement our partners. Just as a reminder, we have a website. That's www.lexingtonky.gov/LexWork. We have an email, work@lexingtonky.gov. We have a phone number, 859-258-WORK. Residents can register for an appointment on their website, or they can walk into the Charles Young Center. Our hours of operation are Monday through Thursday from 9 to 5. And sometimes we do have changes that's on our calendar on our website. So for example, this Thursday, we're not going to be there because it's Fayette County Public Schools. That's their calendar, and our workforce partner was taking the day off. So examples like that, sometimes it can change a bit. The next steps are maybe offering some virtual appointments. We're going to talk about that at our next meeting with our workforce partners, because as you know, because of COVID, there's a lot of entities who already have a Zoom account. Then maybe we do a job fair. We're looking at that as well, or maybe we do a virtual job fair. And then, of course, the evaluation of the program. How's it going? What can we change? What can we keep? We've had several, that's me, myself, and I on the outreach methods. We've had the press release, of course, because when we first opened the center, we've had webinars, and we've had mailings. We mailed postcards we mailed 2,800 postcards to neighborhoods around Charles Young. We had meetings with Williams Well Brown Elementary and the local school staff. We also had meetings with local churches, and thank you, Anthony Wright. He brought me to one of the churches. The council member newsletter, so Council Member James Brown, that's his district, so he put a lot of information in his newsletter that he sends to the neighborhoods. I also attended the East End Neighborhood Association meeting. We also had outreach assistance from the advisory board. There's a lot of different advisory board members at Charles Young, so they've been great in promoting the program. One of those board members is Dale Morgan, and so he invited me to be on Radio Lex, so we did that. Thank you, Dale. Video project, we hope to have that done by next week, maybe the week after, and that basically is 5 minutes of our workforce partners talking about what they do and some great stories of people impacted. And then what we hope to do is get some social media around that. And then also signage. If you've been past the Charles Young, it sits back, and it's kind of been always known as this center that's a little bit closed. So we want to get some signage. We want to look into the cost of those to see how much it would cost us to have some temporary signage of, look, we're here. Questions?
So before we go to questions, I just want to say, this has been a challenging first year for our partners. Really challenging because, when we started this, we knew we're starting a program to try to work with those that maybe in some cases were the hard to place anyway. You layer on the challenges COVID has placed on them. And then you look at the ones especially that did licensure type programming, where in many cases the state groups that oversee that are closed and they can't even get. So it has been a challenging year. And every step of this way, and I'm saying this just to compliment Elodie and the work she's doing, because not only did she navigate that with the partners, but she worked with all of them to come help with a new initiative at Charles Young to go into more of a neighborhood strategy where we had maybe some unemployment rates and things that we wanted to see if we could impact. And she got all of them on board to come over there, plus some more, to help us get this kicked off, trying to help the residents of this, because that program's open to everybody. It's there because of proximity to the audience we wanted to reach out to. So she has navigated in workforce a year I hope she never has to navigate again, and none of us have to live through again. So Elodie, thank you. It's been, you've done a fabulous job. So with that, questions for Elodie? I'm looking around. Holler at me if you've got one.
Right here.
And Tyler?
This is just, and this may not be within the scope of what you're working on, Elodie, because I know you have partners in the licensing and certification, but seeing the CDL, Lextran is hiring right now. They obviously give CDL training. I know you know that, but any outreach that we can do with Lextran to get new drivers, that's something that is a huge push and obviously really important to the city in general.
Yes, the Fayette County Public Schools as well, as we all know.
We are too. The city.
Oh, the city, yes, that's correct. That's correct.
Big time.
Anything else? Sean?
Thank you, Elodie, and it's clear you all have done a lot of work. I'm just curious and I know it's early, but what has the initial interest been in the neighborhood? How's it been received, and are we seeing some traffic and people taking next steps into that so far?
Thank you for that question. We have had a lot of great input from ambassadors and input from the partners. What we have not had is the foot traffic. We're sorely disappointed in that. However, it's not just us. There is a group, one of the entities here who comes to the Charles Young Center every week. They traditionally have had a job fair every year. Before COVID, in 2019, they would have about 30 employers to 40 employers that would show up and about 200 people. They had one a couple months ago. They had the same amount of employers, 30 to 40. They had 20 job seekers. So we've had 21 in this time frame. So that's why we versed this as a pilot project. We have not had requests for virtuals. We've not had requests to meet in the evenings and the weekends. We've done continuous outreach. It is just, Brad and I were talking about this before the meeting, it is just unprecedented. And we don't know what's happening here, but there's people who are looking for jobs. We don't know where they are. I was looking and analyzing some workforce participation and unemployment numbers, and that's for another day, but there's not a simple explanation for it. I don't think it's that neighborhood necessarily. I think it's the time that we're living in. So the question ultimately is, what do we do? How do we change it? Do we stick to the original plan? I don't know.
Council member?
Melody, I appreciate what you're doing. This is real hard what you're doing. And I'm going to tell you why. Because I was a big Merit Training Center. And it took years for everybody to know where it was located. And it works, but you're going to have time to really get your name out there and get people. You got to get trust in the neighborhood associations. You got to get trust out in the community. And my concern is if we move it, you may build up a base there, and then you're going to confuse it getting around. That's why the Merit Training Center worked very well. And I was a big fan of it, which we still had it. And Todd Johnson now has moved his home builders down there. I have sent many people through there who have got, because being on the housing building construction as commissioner, I've had a lot of people who want to be electrician, HVAC. They didn't know where to go, so I sent them there, and they've gotten some of this grant money to help them go through there. I commend what you're doing. I think you're doing. Don't get frustrated. It's going to take a long time for this to come back. From what I saw where the Merit Training Center took where it was, and once it got where it went on. I see the potential there. It just don't give up. And because we have to bring back that kind of use Ed, what's that last name?
Holmes?
Oh, he had a result out from 20 years ago, 10 years ago, after we shut down the Mayor's Training Center, that unemployment in that area went up to 20%. Even though Lexington is only 2.4, 4.2, but when you go into those neighborhoods, but during the Merit Training Center years, those numbers were way down. And I just want you to know there are hopes out there, and don't give up. But and that's something I've been pushing for, and I will continue to push for, that we bring that back, even though we sent the money to the Bluegrass ad, which I think was a mistake. But that's another day and another argument. But don't give up. I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you.
Jordan?
I just had a question. Like, how can we help broadcast this from the business community? Like, what can we do to help?
That's a good question. Thanks for asking. I think the social media, we don't have a Facebook account, we don't have a social media account. I think probably the most tangible thing is once we get our video done, I would love to send that out to all the board members, and then for you all to share that with whoever you think would be appropriate, and whether it's on your LinkedIn account if you have that, or what have you. I think when we have, maybe if we have a job fair, maybe attending if you can, just to kind of meet and greet. The workforce partners are doing a spectacular job. I'm like, thank you for coming. So I think that's probably the most tangible thing right now. And then any other things that you can think of as far as outreach goes. It's just a strange time that we're living in.
Are local businesses able to give money for the signage or sponsor the signage in some way? I know you're looking at the costs of that, and obviously for walking traffic, that would be very helpful. I'm just thinking there are several businesses here that love to write checks.
Well, we won't, certainly wouldn't turn that down. Yeah, that's a really good question, sponsoring things. I know we've had lots of employers reaching out. We certainly have had that, and I've been, you know, I'm very cognizant of time, and employers, specifically small businesses, as Tyrone knows, they're doing everything, so they don't have really time to come and sit and wait for job seekers to come in. And the purpose of our workforce partners is to prepare people for that job interview. As you all know, there's resumes, there's online job applications, reference checks, any of those things that they have to scan. Any of that stuff is at the Charles Young Center. That's the purpose of it. But to your point, I think if we can get maybe some sponsorship, maybe for the job fair if we have one, or maybe for the signs, because I haven't looked at the quotes yet, so there's certainly going to be some ongoing costs there.
We'll let Jordan know, because traditional would be an excellent.
And one thing, I don't remember you talking about it, Elodie we kind of did something the old-fashioned way, if you will. We sent postcards literally to everybody within a certain geographic region, kind of like we do on zone change notices, to let people know that center is there and operating.
This is the new thing, baby. Social media.
And one of the things, a council member brings up a good point. One of the things you all may have seen last week, where we're working with the Business Education Network at Commerce Lexington on some jobs related to healthcare, and working in partnership with the local healthcare consortium. And one of the things they're looking at, and when Richard holds up his phone, is how do we market using the technology that we all have around with us all the time, and make sure that when we pick up our phone, you know, you're walking through the aisles at Lowe's, it tells you what you need from that aisle, whether you do or not. If you're like me, then you go buy it. How do you market to the folks there? So we're going to get the message out, but anything you all can do when you're talking in your kind of spear groups, let us know. Any more questions for Elodie? Michael?
Hi, Ellie.
Hi.
I'm not sure how relevant this is. Have we done outreach to like major corporate recruiting companies, like actual recruiters for corporations? Because on just relationships that I have, I hear a lot of applications, but they're not necessarily a fit. So they're in their job and their networking, or their actual network, is largely focused on, well, if I can't help you, I'm certainly going to look to see if there is another way that I can help you. So maybe there's some spillover there of people that are applying for other positions but aren't necessarily a good fit, but are still looking for something. If maybe that would just be another avenue to get some more eyes on.
Yeah, I think that's the job seekers we've seen. The first one we saw, I'll never forget him, Leroy. I don't have to say his last name, but he came in and he didn't have an ID. He didn't have a place to live, and he just was living in a person's garage. That's our first job seeker. We have seen some with higher education that have come in. So maybe that's like another group of job seekers, to your point, that we could target and provide the same kind of services at Charles Young. I think the intent was to sort of help prepare people for jobs, but we could certainly look at that next stage, if you will, of job seekers who already have work experience, or they already have applied for a job and they weren't a good fit. Maybe they need to go back to school, because we have BCTC there. So they're there every week, and they have so many opportunities right now to go back to school. So, you know, I know there's a group of people who are ready to do something different, and we were trying to give that opportunity to people who would come in the door and say, I'm sick of what I'm doing and I want to go back to school, but I don't know what for. But we haven't had a lot of people come in for that.
Elodie, I don't see any more questions, so let's go on to the next topic while you're standing there. So we talked a little bit earlier about the challenges the last year has presented, especially for those looking at the licensure programs. Craig's getting ready to hand you all a letter of request. So you always appreciate an entity that comes to you early and lets you know they're having problems and explains to you why they're having the problems. And this one's all COVID. I can assure you it is all COVID. So we were approached by Community Action, who is one of our partners, and they had applied under the licensure and certification efforts the last time, and year one has been a challenge for them. And so they have come and they want to put year one behind them and move on to year two, I think is the best way to say that as you look at the letter. And really focus in more on CDL in year two, and solely CDL. And as everybody up here just kind of recognized a few minutes ago, we're in need of CDLs in this community. So we're, as a staff, in support of what you see in front of you, but we want to make sure you all are, and Community Action is here with Elodie. So, Elodie, why don't you kind of give the high points of what's in the letter? Kind of the last paragraph, I think, is the central request. And then we'll open it up for board questions. If you all are in agreement, we will then take this to council by an updated PSA. But we want to make sure this board was comfortable first. Elodie?
So Melissa Tibbs is with us today from Community Action. Thank you for Melissa for being here. And Melissa and I have been working together on the COVID issue when we awarded these grants. As you know, the child care facilities closed down. So Child Development Associate was one of the credentials that we had awarded Community Action Council with. But because of COVID, obviously with the close down, one of the Child Development Associate, you have to have, as with most things, you have to have classroom hours. You have to take a test, but you can't take the test till you have the classroom hours. So they were significantly impacted by the close down, even though they began, and Melissa, of course, is here to answer any questions, but even though when they opened back up to the public, the amount of hours that you have to get as a person going through that program is quite significant, not to mention the testing. So the COVID issue was one thing, and as the letter details, the staffing issue is another thing. So as you know, with even the agencies that are at Charles Young, they all have had significant staffing changes in their own organizations. And so with the trainer who was responsible for those CDAs, she left, and then the CDL trainer also left. Now, Community Action fortunately has another CDL trainer. However, the CDL program, same thing. You have to get a certain number of driving hours before you can take the road test. You also have to take, obviously, a permit in the meantime. So you have a lot of significant things happening simultaneously. Therefore, the goals that they intended to meet, which was 25, a combined CDA and CDL, didn't happen. And if you see from the previous slide, there was 3 who did get their license. We have a lot of people who are enrolled for their permits now that things are opening back up. And then we had 1 CDA. And so so Melissa and I worked together to come up with a solution to what could be done. And so essentially what this is saying is that they would give us back, so they were able to get 4 total individuals through the programming. And so what that breaks out in our PSAs to about $2,000 per person. So they would pay us back the $17,000 because they were awarded $50,000. In these grants, we give half up front, so that was $25,000. And then we give half when they meet their goals. So we were out $25,000. We'll pay them for those 4 individuals who went through the programming, which would mean they would owe us $17,000. And then for year 2, they want to continue on, thank you, to provide CDL training to Ann Tyler's point. They think they can get 10 based on their current numbers of those enrolled, which would equate to $20,000 because it's $2,000 per participant for year 2. So essentially, that's the conundrum that we're in. And I want to thank Melissa and Community Action for working with us on this.
And Elodie, when you say year 2, just so everybody, give us the year 2.
Yes.
July to,
Year 2 started in July of this year and will go to June 30th of 2022.
questions for Elodie? Or, I mean, is everybody in agreement that this is acceptable?
It's acceptable to me.
I think if somebody wants to make a motion so we could move forward. Before we do that, Melissa, do you want to add anything? Or you need to, it's the only way it gets on the recording.
No, Elodie explained our conundrum, as she used the term, very well. We definitely do want to move forward with CDL, and we are also committed to continuing to work with those who have received their permits but have been unable to successfully receive their license. That's just our commitment to the individuals. And so just so that you all know, while we are fully acknowledging that we need to repay, that's part of the contract, and we understand that, we are going to continue to provide the assistance. The new CDL trainer that we have moved into that role has done quite a few things, as I mentioned in the letter, so you can see that, to try to help retention, but also really a lot of the self-confidence and a lot of, things. It's difficult. It's very, very difficult. We've had, colleagues of mine who have the CDL who also have a master's degree, and they go, that's definitely hard. You have to know lots of things, and it can be very intimidating for a lot of the folks that are coming along, that we're coming alongside. So just so that you all know that information as well, we're not in a position to be able to resume CDA to the outside public, not just because of COVID, but also because we're about to be in compliance with the vaccine mandate that has put out by President Biden's administration because of our Head Start operations. So there's a lot of working parts there, and we just cannot resume it for a public audience. But that's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we proceed with the staff's recommendation to move forward, just as presented.
Motion by Tyrone, Anthony on the second. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you all.
For the record, Kevin, I do need to recuse because of our representation of community.
Did you get that, Craig? Craig, did you hear Ann Tyler?
I recuse because we represent community action.
Okay, and the last item, update on the agenda, we asked Tyrone to just come let you all know real quick. He's spent a year, the council has entrusted his Loan Access Committee with our small business recovery efforts for about the last year. So we just asked him to give you all a quick update on that effort.
And thank everybody for your patience today. But just wanted to take a moment that you can't start this without saying that we appreciate the volunteerism of Traditional Bank. I mean, they've had their staff involved in this in many levels, and getting all the grants out to folks. And this is in 2 programs, over the course of a year and a half. But I'm going to be speaking to you specifically today about the Small Business Economic Recovery Program. And then secondly, we're one of that makes us a lucky city. And I think what makes us a lucky chamber is that I've had a group of volunteers, 7 of them, that have committed hundreds of hours to this whole thing. So it's not about Commerce Lexington or my name that's up there or any of that. It's about all these people from the bank and the volunteers that have put this together. And Craig, if you'll go to the next slide, please. Real quickly, just want to let you know that through September, the program, the total requested funding was $11.3 million for just under $5 million, out there. So we had a lot to wade through. Again, one of the things that you look at is that nobody knew what to do, so a lot of these small business owners don't apply for grants, so they apply for $25,000, and it's up to committee to whittle that down. So I want to be clear about that while I'm speaking publicly. Total of 430 applicants. We've actually funded to date 342. You can see the racial breakdown, and women and minorities total 59%. I think that's a testament to people coming through the door. All we can do is basically get the information out to agencies and get the information out to groups and individuals, and through the mediums that we have, and then that's what has that's what has come back. So included administrative fees, basically $4.9 million has gone out the door. We still have about 15 or 16 grants that we're trying to close out right now. All the grant program is closed, just want to say that, but we still have a bunch of grants to get out, and that has to do with signing and making sure that we finish out the funds in a very judicious manner, and we don't go over. And believe me, it's a little bit more meticulous than one would think. I want to be careful because I think Kevin knows I went over the first time about $4,000, and it's just you could get lost in it with all these grants. But I can tell you that across the different, and we'll do a deeper report for the council at a later date, which they've contracted with us to do. But the one thing I will tell you is that with this particular group of grants, we had an opportunity to sit down for 5 to 7 minutes and do a grant and do a closing with each one of the grantees. And everyone, I'm talking about 90, we estimate about 95% of them said, I'm trying to find employees. Across every sector of the community, I'm down in employees. I haven't recovered since the first part of the pandemic, all those things. And it's a phenomenon because I think that all of the federal funding is gone. So nobody really has an answer, and we still ask them, how are you doing on unemployment? How are things going? Because we informed them that we'll be contacting them several times over the next year. As part of this agreement that you're signing, we're going to be contacting you. So don't sign it unless you agree that to be contacted, and you're going to give us information, right? And they said, well, look, it's going to take me some time to really find new employees. So just want to put that out to the public, put it out to this group that has been gracious enough to let this pass-through funding happen, and to the council for coming up with the final approval. But it's been quite the experience, I would say.
So Tyrone, the first set of money was $2.5 million in grants back in the early days.
Oh yeah, right after closing.
Where, businesses were just fighting to survive, the best small businesses. And then the second round was $5 million, and these are more traditional kind of programs where there's clawback provisions, and they're based on employment and payroll. So when he says that they're going to be talking to them throughout the year, I think that's really important, because I look at my friend over here on the left, I call him my friend when we're in public like this.
You and not
one of the goals council had was the diversity of this program.
Right.
Needed. And then one of the points that Richard kept bringing up when the discussions on to do this was going on, and he may want to say something, is that it truly gets in the hands of the small businesses, the people, not the 150, 200 employee business, but where it can really make a difference in the community. And I'm going to assume, and Richard, you can speak to the point, that the council has been pleased with the way this has turned out.
Yeah, the council's been real pleased, and Tyrone and all you folks have been helping. It's getting out to all the community, and everywhere they go, people brag about this program, the businesses do, and I'm glad we're doing it. It goes back to some of my point. This is what money, the pandemic money that we're getting, need to go back into those and not into new programs. And that's why I get frustrated when I sit up here sometimes and I hear things going on. And one example that we were brought up, and I didn't mean to get out of it, we had one of the council members brought the folks in that want to recruit people from out of the city to come here. And I personally, after seeing what Tyrone did with his money, if we're gonna spend $3 million, we need to give it to Tyrone to keep our business and double the sizes instead of bringing people here, because Lexington's gonna recruit on its own. I don't care what anybody says. Maybe Paducah and places like that, they may have a hard time finding people that wanna work there, but here, Lexington people wanna work here. I just wanna expand the business here, so and Tyrone and your group has done a tremendous job. It sold me, and I think it sold my other colleagues, so I think we weren't too excited about the 3.4.
And just before, and Jordan, I'm gonna come to you, you've been trying, but, we also, the diversity numbers that you see, the goal was to try to get it to at least 50%. You see, again, they blew by that. But the other thing we did after the first round, and maybe if we get the addresses, we can do it again this round, is our GIS people plotted where each business was that got a grant.
That's good.
Just literally every section of this community.
Yeah, that's.
Every, area where there's businesses, it hit all over the community, and that was encouraging. And it was, you can thank the intentional effort by a bunch of people to get out and make sure the businesses knew that. Going to Jordan, and then we're going to go to Anthony.
I have to leave here in a second, unfortunately, to deliver a check to one of the recipients. But just, I've gotten to hand deliver checks, and sometimes when your bank shows up at your business, it's not necessarily a good thing. So it's been nice to almost be like Santa Claus recently and just kind of drive around and get people checks.
Yes.
But it's been educational for me to see the diversity of the businesses, the types of businesses that have applied, from salons to restaurants to production studios, in businesses I've never heard of that I didn't know were in Lexington. So
yes,
it would almost been nice to have a film crew to just kind of, when you go and you meet with people, I meet them at their office, their studio, wherever, to get a tour, to hear their history, to hear how appreciative they are of the funds. It's been really exciting. So I just wanted to thank Tyrone, to thank the city of Lexington, because I think it's been extremely beneficial to the local businesses, and I just appreciate the opportunity to kind of drive around town and hand out checks.
Thank you for that, Jordan. It's good to get that kind of feedback, particularly from the bankers. That's awesome.
Hold on one second. If you're leaving, Elodie may want to give you her business card, because Ann Tyler's already promised you all her business.
Yeah, you have to.
So
go ahead and get ready.
Go ahead, Anthony.
Being quick.
Sounds like a lawyer.
Anthony, I'm sorry.
No problem. I wanted to take a moment to also commend the work that Tyrone has done on this and the importance of this money. And I'm just thinking about the first round that we got, and you all know the time when we received the first round of funds, and we were really dealing with racial unrest throughout the entire country. And I'm sitting on the Mayor's Commission for Racial Justice and Equality, and we're talking about some of these things and what we can do to make things right. And I highlighted in the report the work that Tyrone had done, because in the midst of everything we were dealing with, I think your numbers were even higher in the first round. And that's to be commended because of intentional effort. Somebody said intentional, and that's exactly right. When you're intentional about the effort and you try to make sure that the dollars are invested in the right places where you can see a return, it's good for everybody. And I have to say, this was in contrast to the other money that was out there, because I saw the numbers on how many went to women and minority-owned businesses, and it was atrocious. I mean, the big companies got all of that money. And so when we saw a very targeted effort and a concentrated effort to really deal with what we needed to do to boost our community, Tyrone was right at the center of it, Commerce Lexington was right at the center of it, and I applaud this group for entrusting him with the funds, because it will help all of us in the community. So well done.
Well, in the midst of all of that, people decided to do something positively. We were just the instrument that it flowed through, but think of all those council people and, the bank coming forward. We decided to do something positive, and I think that's what a city this size can do, can make moves, can be nimble enough to do some things like this for its citizens.
Anybody else? No, I just thought it sounded like you were going to say something. With that, any other comments from the board about any item that you would like to bring up? Hearing none, do we have a motion to adjourn? And Tyler?
Second.
Tyrone, and we are adjourned. Thank you all.
You go.